All right, it's 8:40 here, Big 550 KTRS. David Stokes is with us. David, good morning this morning.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
Last week you were on the show, and this Lyft and what's the other one? Uber? Is it Uber is the other one? The story first broke, and now it looks like they've got this this judge ruled that Lyft cannot proceed until they work things out. So this ride-sharing, quote-unquote, taxi, but 21st century taxi, where you can go and get a ride from your phone, is now on hold while they figure out what to do. And it was a big story last week. We talked about it here. We talked about it on Friday. And the powers to be on the board meeting were talking about how Lyft really didn't do it right. They came in and they didn't care about the regulations, and they're trying to upset the apple cart, and there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. Which I say, because, for example, give me a moment here. This Lyft, you download the app, cars, you can sign up for it, I can sign up, Kelly can sign up for it, and you put a big giant pink mustache on your car, the company signs off on you, somebody gives you a ride or asks for a ride, you pick them up, you drive them to the airport, you drive them back. That's taking business away from the cabs. The cabs are upset by this because they're not regulated, they don't have the insurance, and this and all that. Well, you know what? What's the difference between that and the website Airbnb? Have you seen this? Do you know that with that website?
I have, and it's in the big scheme of things, it's the same. It's the same argument.
It's the exact same argument. Airbnb is, I have an extra room. I put it out on the internet. I have a room for rent. Somebody comes in and pays me $100. Guess what? Am I a hotel now all of a sudden? No, I'm just renting a room. And the hotels haven't tried to shut that down.
Well, I think they might try that in some places around the country. The regulators are certainly having issues with Airbnb. I think because it's private property, individuals will win that argument in the end, thankfully.
Right.
But I do think you're going to have disputes over it in the same way you're having disputes with Lyft and Uber. And as for Lyft should have tried to upset the apple cart differently, when the apple cart is fixed, I mean, I don't know what you can do. I mean,
right.
Dave Nicklaus in the Post-Dispatch had a good article this weekend where he was talking about when you set these boards and you put the current practitioners of the business, the current taxi cab companies, on the board and give them authority to say who gets a license and who doesn't. And they have that authority. That's how ridiculous it is. Well, I mean, the idea that Lyft should just step back and play within the rules, I think, is when the rules are fixed and unfair, then I think that's an unrealistic demand on that.
Not only is it unfair, but then it's going to cost someone a fortune in legal fees to start a new cab company. So, okay, no, you can start a cab company. It just costs you $1 million to do it legally. Therefore, there are barriers that make it unrealistic for somebody to start natural competition.
Absolutely. And under the guise of protecting public safety, they go 10 steps further than that to limit competition and restrict barriers and enact silly rules like you can't just be one guy who opens up a taxi cab company. You have to have an independent address different from your house with a phone that's answered 24 hours a day. You have to be like this full practicing cab company. You can't just jump in as a guy. Even if you met all the other Metropolitan Taxi Cab Commission requirements and passed their tests and did everything, they still have the burden in to limit competition. And that's the point of it. Under the guise of public safety, the point is to limit competition. Limit consumer choice.
Sorry for interrupting. What's the difference between like a limo companies? I know that there are some people who have private companies and they pick people up in their town cars or limousines. Do they have to also, are they regulated?
They are. On-call sedans, and I think that's what limos would fall under, are under the regulations of the Metropolitan Taxi Cab Commission. That's a different type of license than the taxi cab license, which is different from the airport taxi cab license, which is different from the handicapped accessible taxi cab license. So you have all these different rules, and cabs can't do multiple ones of them. Like you can't be one and then do the other because you don't have any business in one of the things at the time. So yeah, limousines are licensed as on-call sedans under the same under the same guise.
But you look at Airbnb, right? So I have an extra room. If I choose to rent out my room, I rent it out for $50. Guess what? You don't pay the hotel motel tax. I'm not paying for the Edward Jones Dome. I'm not doing for this. I'm not doing that, right? All the things that are burdensome for the hotel, I'm not burdened with because I'm just one guy renting out a room. And where's the stink over that, right? I mean, it's just, this is the way that the world's going. These apps and these phones are changing the way we do business. And the old guard's got to realize that, the world's changing.
Right. With Airbnb, there really is no difference in that, in what you're doing there. With your friends coming into town, he wants to stay with you for the weekend, and at the end of the weekend, he gives you $20 for food and water and stuff he used. There's really no difference there, which is why I think they won't be able to shut that down, and that will move forward effectively, as it should. But with taxi cabs, they're out on the public streets. They've set these rules to give the government a great deal of power, and they're able to just arbitrarily choose who gets a license and who doesn't. And it's absurd. You see the same thing with the fact that at the county council, they're likely to pass landlord licensing for unincorporated St. Louis County tomorrow, where if you want to rent your home to somebody, you now have to get a license from the county to do that beforehand. It's all ridiculous. It's all there as an abuse of government power and to limit competition. And this is why we have a bill at the state legislature right now called the Sunrise Act. And it doesn't eliminate these licenses. It merely imposes some type of process by which, in order to pass a new license for a new occupation, you have to demonstrate some cause. You have to demonstrate some evidence as to why it's needed, and that's been introduced by Representative Eric Burleson, and it's important. I hope it gets through the legislature this year.
I said this before on the air, but I love this story. The occupancy permits, which is sort of original to St. Louis or to the region. Anywhere else I've lived, I've never had this. You have to get an occupancy permit where the city or the town signs off and says, yes, this is an acceptable house for you to rent or sell. But when I was selling my house in the city, I had to go get an occupancy permit so I could sell my house. The inspector comes out. I call. 2 weeks later, the inspector comes out, inspects my house, and writes back and says that I do not have the proper numbers on my back fence in my alleyway. So I had to go to the store and get the numbers to then put on my fence in the alleyway. That's why my house was not ready to be sold.
Because of all the delivery people and your friends who
get
through the alley. Through the alley.
Meanwhile, they didn't pick up the garbage in 10 years I lived there, but by golly, I needed numbers on the back of my fence. Unbelievable. All right, David Stokes, when can we read you? When can we see you?
You can read I recommend, again, the Dave Nicholas column this weekend, where he interviewed several economists talking about how it is terrible, both public policy and terrible economics, to limit consumer choice by granting essential monopolies to the taxi cab companies. You can also read a lot of information on this subject of licensing for all different types of occupational licenses at showmeinstitute.org.
When I first got into radio, I had to have a radio license.
You do. I think you're regulated by the FCC. I would at the national level.
But now they've done away with all of that. You don't need. I mean,
you needed one yourself.
When I first started, you didn't have to pass a test. Years ago, you had to pass a test and take a test. When I first got started, you just had to pay $30 for your license. And then all that went away, like early 90s or something, mid-90s. It all just went away. You don't need a license anymore to talk on the radio. So
And you shouldn't. So good for the federal government in that case.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. David Stokes, have a good week.
Thanks, McGraw. Thanks, Kelly.
8:50. We'll talk a little Mizzou and sports.